I fought the same fight.
You gotta be smarter in your chair.
It'd be nice if there's some sort of universal standard.
I'd like to say so, but I've had my office chair at home for 3.5 years now, and there's still every time I go to like lean back, I end up messing it up somehow.
The dumb guy is the guy that I rely on really like.
Yeah.
I didn't do that automatically.
And then I'll get them on best practices. Change up on then what is
I tried.
So interested in what people were gonna say.
That was a rate increase. That's a question.
You.
Talking like such a offended.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
What time does this meeting start?
5:45.
Oh,
Usually 5:30, but we're waiting for you.
oh,
It's not true. As you can see.
I told everybody to go take 5.
well, it's on my calendar with 5:30.
I think I did that.
That's
To
good.
make sure we were ready.
Smart move. Well done.
Because Jim came on. I started at 5:30, 5:45.
When I pulled in, I saw Megan pulling in right after me, and I thought, okay, I'm all right.
Yeah.
Elliot, do you want me to join your Zoom meeting and just,
You can, I've got the thing here.
oh,
Otherwise-
yep, you're good. Perfect.
Did anyone say that?
Wait, Jason's on this.
Did anybody say they weren't coming?
Yes.
Give me one more.
Non-participant.
What is your attendance
Jason,
look like, Paris?
I think it's called.
Do you usually have pretty good attendance? or-
Yeah. I know I will say we have Andrew out. But you Jason's calling. Didn't hear from Elizabeth or.
There's Jason.
Mike, saw that email, but.
Is Holly gonna talk tonight?
Because she was on Zoom. Data week.
You know that it is also a long.
I-
Like.
Every time Holly's at a meeting, it ends up doing that one.
Just joking.
All set. Oh,
Yeah.
techno.
You start the.
Oh.
Yeah, I've started that. Okay. 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Good.
Yep.
Everybody. I will now call to order the March 27th, 2023 Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. Hillary, would you call the roll, please?
Grant. Brown,
Here.
Thompson.
Here.
Steiger. Samuelson.
Here.
Forrest,
Here,
Reaganitor.
Here. Item number 3 is approval. of-
Megan,
Yeah,
Megan,
Jason.
this is Jason. I just want to apologize that I'm virtual, everyone. I've got another board meeting tonight. It starts at 6:30, so I'm gonna have to leave a little early perhaps from this meeting. So
Oh, that's okay.
anyway,
Thanks for being here, Jason.
yeah, of course.
Item number 3 is approval of tonight's agenda. With respect to tonight's agenda, I would make a motion to move the presentation from City Manager Luke Nelson and City Attorney Jim Doherty regarding board and commission service up to our first substantive item tonight, if no one has any objection to that change to tonight's agenda. Hearing nothing, I'll entertain a motion to approve tonight's agenda with that adjustment.
Samuelson, a motion.
for a second.
All in favor, say aye.
I
Item number 4 is the approval of the February 27th, 2023 minutes of the regular Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. Any changes to the February 27th, 2023 minutes? Hearing nothing, I will entertain a motion to approve the February 27th, 2023 minutes.
Thompson motion.
Samuelson, a second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Are there any members of the public tonight who would like to make a comment on any non-agenda items this evening? Either in person or on the Zoom? Okay, hearing nothing, I will move on to the next item, which will be the presentation from our city manager and city attorney regarding board and commission service. I'll hand it over to Luke and Jim.
Thank you. We also have Lindsay Offenberger, our city clerk, which she's going to be actively participating in the presentation as well. And I'm assuming part of the reason you put us at the beginning of the agenda, because we might teach you something that'll prevent any mistakes later in the meeting.
Yes, hopefully.
Well, thanks for having us. I'm just going to start out by saying thanks to all of you. Having volunteers serve on boards and commissions like this in the community is greatly important for the success of the community. You guys have taken an active role. You get involved, you participate, and we really appreciate that. So thank you. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. First, chapter 23. Jim's going to cover this one.
Okay, basically, this planning and zoning board is created by chapter 23 of our code. Norwalk code goes through different rules and regulations on there. It's everything from appointment to vacancies and to your powers and duties and everything. And the original purpose of this is that it's required for a city that has zoning to have a board such as yourself. Iowa code requires that, and we're not allowed to exercise our zoning, the zoning rights established under the Iowa code without having our own code section established in zoning board. So it is very important. This board is unique in its advisory boards in that it is statutorily established and required by the state of Iowa and under the Iowa code. So it is a board that is different than like Park and Rec that is appointed is created under Norwalk code to assist the council with matters.
Sorry.
Okay. That's okay. And basically, you're looking at, as a list here, zoning regulations, recommend council on the amendments, supplements, changes, modifications, all those go in front of you first. The council greatly values that input. And that's always the first question I have is, well, what means do you have to say about it? And we hear that almost every meeting. So when you are making your comments, even beyond your votes, they like to know what you guys, since you concentrate on and specialize in that area, they are always very interested in getting your input and hearing what you have to say. So, and even beyond just a straight vote, what you guys have said, but you've said, is quite often discussed at the city council level. So if you ever watch those meetings or you don't just we know that they are listening to you and that they value your input a great deal. So any plans, streets, park improvements, monuments, really almost any improvements, public buildings, they all under our code have to be going by the P and Z for your comments. So it's not always your approval, but your comments. The code. It's like I said, it's recommending body only. There are some unique areas in that if on certain zoning decisions you make, if the council does not agree with your decision, it requires a simple majority to override your decision, which would mean 4 out of 5 council members.
The next one is open meetings law. And Lindsay, this is probably a good one for you to go over.
Yep, happy to. As you know, here by this meeting that all of your meetings must be open to the public. If you have a quorum, which is a majority of you, which is 4, since you have a 7-member board. If 4 of you or more meet, that is considered an open meeting. So you have to publish an agenda for that within 24 hours of the meeting to be legal. So it's pretty straightforward. If you don't post an agenda within 24 hours, you're conducting an illegal meeting. Do you want to go through the examples?
Yeah, I think the examples
Okay.
can be some fun things to talk through just as examples.
Sure. So if 4 of you sat by each other at a soccer game, was that illegal?
Are we graded on this?
No, absolutely not.
I think it depends on how hard you're hassling the referee.
That would be legal for a different reason.
Oh, right, yeah.
So it kind of coincides with the second bullet of 4 of you attended a chamber event. Was that illegal or legal? I mean, the simple answer to that is it's legal to do that as long as you don't talk about city business or something that you all would collectively need to talk about as a group. If 4 of you emailed each other in a group email about allowing a rezoning to happen, would that be legal?
We would need to make that part of our record or what we publish to the public.
Yeah, but you should email. I mean,
Sure.
that would be an illegal. That would be illegal to do that.
To email prior to, yes, making a decision in a group email. Now, if, let's say Elliot wanted to send out an email to all of you about something that's upcoming, he can do so by blind carbon copying you. That way, when you all respond, or Luke or Hillary or anybody, then you don't have a quorum in that response of an email. So that is legal.
It's oftentimes classified as a roaming quorum. You've heard that term before. And a roaming quorum could even be something like Elliot emailing you, having one person respond back, and then him emailing the group again and giving thoughts about what he heard from one person. Just because he's the person communicating doesn't make it legal. He's still the impetus of allowing everybody to communicate without being in an open public meeting. So the blind courtesy copy, that's a useful tool for staff. I'm sure that's something that you folks use already. And if you don't see it come through as a blind courtesy copy, would just discourage you from a reply to all. Certainly you don't want to do that.
Yeah, so you touched on the 4th bullet of if Luke Paris called all 4 of you separately to ask how you would vote on an issue, surely that would be okay. That is not okay.
You can jump to the next one, Elliot. So best practices, generally save that discussion opinion for discussion at an open public meeting. Certainly it doesn't mean you can't do your homework and your research, but you want to save the discussion among your members for the open meeting for the rest of the public to participate. And electronic communication concerning public business is a public record. I do believe you have all them set up with Norwalk city email addresses.
Believe they are.
Not all of them or some of them?
Again,
Okay.
if we've ever done that for people.
But if that's something that you felt compelled to do, we could set you up with a dedicated email. Otherwise, just realize that that communication you have for city business, subject to open record.
Do you have in this presentation, or maybe this would be a time to touch on it, communications from applicants that, a lot of our P&Z members are, like their contact information's out there, right? So an applicant says, hey, I would like to talk to each P&Z member, just as sometimes they do want to with council about this upcoming project.
We don't have that here, but what, an interesting position that P and Z is in, this is more for matters that would come in front of you for public hearing, like zoning change. When you have those public hearings, and make a decision with public hearing, the purpose of public hearing is to take input from everybody. And once you have all the facts, then you make the decision, right? So, under the law, it's considered what's called a quasi judicial function, in that you're kind of sitting in judgment, right? And so ideally what you should do is you should be gathering your information through that public hearing and at the public meeting. So getting to what Luke said, individual meetings with developers who are trying to lobby your decision on something that's going to be in front of you in public hearing is usually discouraged. Because then you as one member sitting as a judge are getting ex parte or communications outside that public hearing that everybody on the board and the proponents or opponents of the subject aren't privy to. They aren't hearing that. So and it's important to have all those facts come out in the public hearing, because there's a record established if it's ever appealed from in the courts and everything like that. So there's, with those public hearings, I think what Luke is getting at is your best to discourage individuals from lobbying you on those situations. And no other items that aren't public hearings, you can certainly talk to people that come talk to you about this, but it's important to try to keep it as limited as you can, so that your discussion, your information gathering is at the meetings.
What of a situation, let's say Elizabeth knew that something came up about the drainage by her property and it was somehow related to a zoning item, and she called me to ask me questions about that item.
I think you can certainly ask about those items, I think, but I think you need to be particularly careful of items that are going to be in public hearing. And I think if you were gathering information for public hearing, like if you really were interested in a specific issue regarding something that's to be addressed in public hearing, like, okay, on this zoning matter, I want to know how the lights are going to affect the neighboring property owners. Instead of going and investigating that and asking those facts, you could certainly communicate with Luke or Elliot, or even Luke Nelson here, and basically say, I would like this information provided. I'm expecting to ask these questions, and I want this information provided. So it's okay to ahead of time say, this is what I'm expecting to hear. But instead of gathering that information, just let them know you're expecting to have that information ahead of time. That's a very effective tool, because they won't react to that. If you say, I want this at public hearing, or I want to know this, and that gives them fair warning, and hopefully, if possible, the information will be gathered in time.
May I ask if, like you had said, you really don't want an applicant to come to us and have candid, like private conversations? Does that also go for city council members, or do they, like, is this like a rule all up and down?
Yeah, pretty much, especially with the public hearing things. And the city council members, if they're lobbying you to decide a certain way, saying, hey, I want you to do this because there's no way I'm gonna consider that. I don't think you guys should either. No, your role is come in neutral, come use your best information and so that you can present to the council. So certainly there are certain areas of law where the council directs you. I mean, for instance, a rezoning petition can be started by the council where they vote saying, hey, we would like planning and zoning to consider this, but that usually that's about the extent of it, is getting directions on what they want to consider, but as far as they shouldn't be contacting them saying, hey, we're recommending rezoning, you know what, we've got a really good business coming up and I expect you to approve that. Because I do appoint you. Stuff that would be inappropriate.
So the next one, what needs to be included in the agenda? Take that one.
Yeah, just enough information that the public can make a good decision as to whether or not they want to come to the meeting. So saying something such as approval of old minutes would not be acceptable. You need to list the date. Yeah, just enough that they can make a reasonable decision whether or not there's something being discussed that they want to be here for. And then just a special note, when it comes to public participation, it is not required. So it's not a meeting open for the public. It's open to them, but it is allowed if you want it to be. So I know the mayor, as Megan, as you mentioned at the beginning, public comment on the agenda, and then the mayor and council meetings, he asks after every item, but that's not something that you absolutely have to do, but
All the
can if
time
you,
for public hearings.
yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't say that, but public hearings for sure.
Megan, if that's how you choose to do your meetings, to open that up for public, my only recommendation would be to be consistent.
Okay.
You know, if you're going to give a certain amount of time to one person, give that equal amount of time to somebody else. And consistently at each meeting, open up. Make sense?
You may touch on this later in the presentation, but with us having in-person meetings, but also streaming and via Zoom, I assume that I should continue to try to treat both places equally in that way too, and make sure that we're getting participation from Zoom as well.
Yeah, Zoom participation, I guess I'll go ahead, but it's tricky because there's always a lag, right? So we do not take any comments at a council meeting from YouTube.
Okay.
Because there is an extreme lag there. And when I say extreme, I don't mean 10 minutes, but there's enough of a lag that it wouldn't let the meeting run smoothly. But it is a good idea to keep an eye on your Zoom comments and a hand raised on Zoom. It might be important to say at the beginning that you will do your best, but if someone does really want to participate in the meeting, it is best that they show up in person.
Okay.
And there's no rule that, like Lee said, there's no rule that you have to have specific input, but I think if you know you're gonna have a real confrontational or well-attended public hearing, it's a good idea to decide how you're gonna handle that, because certainly you can say, limit those type of online comments. Because it's really kind of endless on what we do. If people start typing in comments, and we at some point in time, we want to limit that type of participation also if it's not productive.
Okay.
So the next one, talking about minutes. So Hillary does a great job putting together minutes. Reason for this information, for you all to know about it, is for you just to pay attention to those minutes and know what to look for to make sure the right amount of information is included. Of course, date, time, place, board members present. If you missed a meeting and you're looking at minutes, you might want to make sure your name doesn't show up in there. If you know you made a motion on something, just double check those. Do you have anything else on that?
I don't, nope.
Okay. So open records best practices. Jim, you want to take this one?
Well, basically, there's two chapters affecting openness. One is we talked about open meetings. That's chapter 21. This is chapter 22, which talks about open records. And it includes documents, really tapes, other information, recordings, any type of media that the city possesses are open records. It can electronic communication, so that touches on your emails and your texts. So if you're using your private computer to conduct city business, if there's litigate, technically those are open records. So they are subject to open records requests and things like that. So you might want to consider having emails not stored on your computer. it's like Google accounts, for instance, don't store them on a computer, they're out to the out on the web, so they aren't necessarily on your computer. So in the event of public records request or something gets really ugly, you don't see it, but luckily we've been very fortunate since Norwalk not to have one of those type of items go on. But if you read the papers on it, there's big municipal disputes where suddenly they're having massive open records requests, including, you know, all emails, et cetera, involving the subject. And if you happen to have those stored on your computer, technically your computer get pulled in on those litigations. Be reviewed.
Some of the best advice I ever received was from a colleague, said, don't write an email unless you could expect to see it on the cover of the Des Moines Register. Anything else? No. So that pretty much wraps up the bulk of it. Lindsay was going to go over a few of the resources available to you.
Yep, in front of you, actually, you've got a book from the Iowa Freedom of Information Council. That's yours to keep. Feel free to read it. It talks about what we've just talked about tonight, just in more detail. And then there's some other websites up here if you prefer websites. The League of Cities, I will be honest, is the best resource to me anyhow. So if you're ever needing anything, we've got a great website. But always feel free to reach out to myself or Jen or any of your staff. We're here for your questions.
Anything we missed, anything that needs clarification? We streamlined this quite a bit from our previous presentation. Trying to be respectful of your time and a lengthy agenda. Do you have any questions for us?
Is there anything, you know, any of the items in particular that you are more concerned about than others that you really want us to pay attention to?
For me, it would probably be that comment that I made about the public record and thinking through the things that you email out. And, you know, there's a good chance many of these items happen, no big deal, but the time where we have some contentious issue that comes up and somebody does that open records request, having been cautious with what you email and how you communicate would prove beneficial down the road. That's probably a key point I would pass along. Lindsay, do you have anything specifically?
No, I mean, when paying special care, I guess I would say definitely at your public hearings. That's when you need to ask the questions that you want to make your decisions based on.
Jim?
Because the only thing is just keep in mind, you know, all city staff, including everyone sitting here, are available as a resource to you. So don't feel shy. If you've got an issue, I'm always available and everybody's available. And it's you're doing an important job. I just don't discount what you're doing because it's very valued by the city council. It's valued by the state of Iowa under the Iowa code, and it's a needed function of the city. And if you need information, don't be shy about asking for it.
And we're always here if you ever need any of us to attend a meeting for any reason. Just drop us a line and we'll be here. Any other questions? Excellent. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you all for the information. That is invaluable.
Thank you.
for us. Okay, what has become item number 7, discussion related to storage facilities in Norwalk with Peter Corcoran and Brian Winslow. Elliot, would you brief us on this item, please?
I'm just gonna kick it right over to our guests here tonight, so no intro needed for me. I did put the letter that was submitted into staff report, so hopefully everyone's had a chance to look at that. If you guys need me to do anything up here, let me know, okay?
Okay. Peter Corcoran address, right?
Yes, thank you.
502 North 10th Avenue, Winterset, Iowa.
Brian Winslow, 3616 Tri-State Drive.
And we're back. We're not talking about the last one. We just, after the meeting, we moved on from that one, but kind of got curious and started doing some homework and started looking through zoning rules in other towns and what Norwalk's was, and kind of saw something that we kind of called characterization, miscategorization. And we found this and we decided, let's reach out to Elliot. And I actually talked to Luke Nelson as well in the same meeting. We kind of brought the same letter, or at least the bullet points of other zoning. And we brought it to them, just kind of wanted to have like a path forward on what we should be doing. Because if you look, there's not a lot of C3s in Norwalk. And that's what we run up to. So in that meeting, it was kind of, bounce back and forth that maybe it'd be a good idea just to come in instead of having a specific project that we're here and beating our head against a wall and doing the same thing over and over. Let's come talk to P and Z and see if we can provide our information that we found and see if you have questions or, a path forward that would allow Luke or zoning with the city of Norwalk to maybe be a little more flexible with projects like this. We went through C3 does not, and the big points I'll try to make, doesn't want it to be next to residential. And that to me was a sticking point in my head, because you drive through quite a bit of things in the metro area and see them right next to residential. And that's where we went and started finding Waukee, Ankeny, Altoona and Urbandale, where these projects that are called non-nuisance projects are allowed next to residential. And then we come back and look at Norwalk's where it says, by no means should this be next to residential. And that's where we kind of wanted to see if there is an opening where we can let Luke know, or Elliot know, that there should be some flexibility in moving forward with a project like this.
So that was my question was, so it sounds like the removal of that qualification in the C3, is that what you're looking for from us to get our thoughts on that piece?
I guess, could you see where, and I don't know exactly all the avenues that, whether it's amending a PUD amendment, I just felt that last time when we tried to go from a C4 to a C3, that was different. Could it be where if something's already a PUD, can we amend a PUD that allows specific use of self-storage to be in an area that we go and meet with Elliot and say, okay, does this make sense here? And if Elliot has, from what I don't want to put words in your mouth, but his comment was when we met was, I kind of have to go by the book. Was that correct?
That is an accurate statement.
Okay. So if he has to go by the book and something's not that, he's kind of boxed in from that standpoint where we see it being allowed in other communities and we see it as a non-nuisance that we're not going to be, affecting too many people. And if we can set it up with buffers, with landscaping, with certain design that it would fit into a project, we would like to do that, work with him, and then bring it back to P and Z to see what your thoughts are.
Under current zoning that we have here in Norwalk, what areas, what is self-storage facility allowed? Do we have like these M1 light industrials similar to what the other municipalities around us have?
Yeah, it's so C3 clearly, and
Yep.
then I forget if it's IC or M1, one of the industrial commerce parks at least, and it's C3 uses also.
And where are those,
We don't have a lot of
Right.
south of town, but we've got.
And our
I
issue,
think, I'm sorry, but to your guys' point, I think one of the things that you were trying to portray was the convenience of having it a little bit more centrally located as opposed to the south part of town.
our point was, if you look I didn't get very in-depth with this because I didn't want to bore you on this paper. I try to keep it as simple as possible. If you look at everything that's allowed in Norwalk's manufacturing or industrial code, it catches all. Where these other cities have 3 different codes, one of them having to be light industrial. That is kind of non-nuisance. And that's what we're looking to try to find a home for our project.
Cause you could have one self-storage project that's south of town. And then you could very well have to drive through a concrete plant, buy a concrete plant, buy, you know, a huge warehouse or something just like Michael's with stacks and so that was sort of things going out. So that's where the nuisance factories that they've zoned with different classifications in the industrial complex, mini storage, we're trying to, it's a non-nuisance mini storage. It's not a warehouse that could be, you know, 100,000 square foot warehouse. But in ours, it catches all of that. So, you know, if we had to find a spot that would allow for a non-nuisance storage, that doesn't necessarily have to be located in a completely industrial area, that would be our goal.
But yeah, you're right on it being convenient. That's one of the things that we were looking for, it being a convenient. If someone's got kids in their car and they're trying to go pick up Christmas decorations that they want to get out of storage, we feel like a convenient location in a very accessible place is going to be a lot better of a factor for a project rather than getting into an industrial site.
It looks like with the flex commercial kind of use, when you head west towards the S curves, in the future, it looks like there is quite a bit of area already designated for the flex commercial that we talked about a lot in the last meeting with those 2 3.5 acre spots. So we have, of course, the spots to the east that are flex commercial. Then we have spots to the west that are future that are also going to be flex commercial. So it feels like there's enough of that type of zoning area to accommodate the next 30, 40 years of Norwalk's growth.
You know, pull up the land use plan, Elliot.
Hold that up a time or two.
I want to make a couple of comments and I'm not sure, this is such a different experience than what we usually have at P and Z, but to be completely honest, I don't like the idea of the self-storage coming to us on PUD amendments because I feel like the code and the current zoning does adequately address it. I can understand wanting to change the requirements about where the mini warehouse can go compared to the comparators statutes that you provided for us. But I think our code is specific in the sense that it views the mini warehouse, the self-storage, as it should not be close to residential areas. And I understand that for your project, that distinction is not one that you agree with. And I think that it's hard for me to agree to just go against what we've already set out as where we would like the self-storage mini warehouse to go within the city, especially given the fact that we just redid the comprehensive plan in terms of, you know, we're talking about what's going to be going on in the city for the next, you know, good chunk of time.
So I look at it as 4 other cities that allow this, that have had it and haven't had any issues with it to the point where they haven't taken it out. And they see it as a good thing. And that actually, if we look at what Norwalk currently has in storage facilities, those are already back up to residential. And what we're just asking is to maybe to give Elliot some flexibility with looking at a project as a whole Does it need to be across the board? We're not asking anybody to change anything on this. But would you give him flexibility to make look at a site, if it fits, and it's not gonna be, adversely negative to any of the neighbors, and that we do buffers and do different things that are gonna make it look nice to the community and the surrounding areas? Do you think that's a good idea?
Be very site specific with it, don't put these right in the middle of it.
Yeah, this is not gonna be backed up to.
It's not like talking about all four sides. It's gonna be.
And this has nothing to do with the last one. We're not coming back with that same one. Or if this is completely a different area that we'd be looking at.
Well, and I think that's what I'm having trouble with. And I'm having trouble conceptualizing what information we're supposed to give an opinion on, because what you're talking about is something that exists for you to come to us with a requested PUD amendment. And instead of coming to us with something like that, you've just come to us and asked for our opinion about a non-specific circumstance. And that's where I'm having trouble, other than just kind of dealing with the code sections. And I understand that it's worked well in other areas, but all I have to go off of is the public response to the last location. And that, that was clearly, the public had issue with that.
Okay.
And so I completely understand that you're not bringing that same issue back to us tonight, but, in kind of trying to steer the discussion with the other commission members, that's what I'm struggling with, is how can I give you an opinion about something that's just
But is it worth,
not a concept?
is it worth their time trying to find a better site to maybe take to Elliott to then possibly bring to us? And I don't want to waste your time or our time or anyone's time. I agree with what you've been saying. I don't want to reference the prior discussion that was a couple weeks ago. I don't know. And then seeing the Waukee and the Ankenees, I'm not sure if Norwalk wants to be like that.
That's kind of what I keep going back to, is that Norwalk has what we has because it's, exclusive to us, and it's what, we don't intend to try and, hey, we want to be the next Ankeny. So the other locations, while it provides information, I'm not sure that's totally pertinent to Norwalk specific in terms of furthering the conversation, I guess, if that makes sense. And the fact that, again, what we have is established for Norwalk, it's not to replicate what's going on in other communities. For me personally, that's my viewpoint.
I think a lot of those are more the exceptions rather than. I think most of these storage areas that are in the metro, it's when I spend my time looking on Google Maps, are more in kind of like you said, like in a light industrial-ish type of area. There are some that are kind of shoehorned into some existing areas, but again, those all have buffers. I guess, is there an additional buffering requirement we throw on something like an M1 that's adjacent to, depending on what it is. A lot of the ones that are you guys have kind of thrown in examples are, a lot of them are adjacent to R2. There's not a lot of them that are adjacent. There's some that are adjacent to R1. Like I said, those are kind of the rare occasion, I guess, when I look at it.
So from a staff perspective, I think a couple things for you all to think about would be one, I think from them trying to find a site, we don't have a lot of C3 ground, right? So one of the discussions then is, where in the city would more C3 be appropriate? That maybe something like that would work. And then would it be prudent to consider that use not being a C3 use and being more of a C2 use? That would be another way to do that. If you go under the first one, trying to identify new C3 ground, one of the challenges with that on our land use plan, I think you guys mentioned the S curve and kind of out west. Any area that we identify as new urbanism, we would tend to think that would be more C2, C3, or C2, C4, that type of use, which that's kind of what the Brody's Landing project kind of ran up against from a use perspective was we have to say the zoning meets the intent of the land use plan. And when a land use plan calls for a new urbanism development in an area, it's hard to say that a C3 use maybe meets that. So that's one thing to think about. And then again, the other thing would be, should that use definition get maybe changed? On the map with the future land use map, really the areas that we would say C3 would be appropriate would be anything that's red. So, red or the kind of dark maroon all the way up, but I don't think you guys want to go all the way out to the interstate. So, that's maybe a little too far out in the future. So anyway, those are just some things as I've been looking through their stuff and trying to think through how we further discuss this topic is really, yeah, if they're looking for new sites, how can we potentially accommodate that with things? I do think from like a buffer standpoint, we've got pretty robust buffer requirements. If we ever did end up with the scenario where that C3 was up against residential, I feel pretty confident our buffering would be good for that from a base requirement. So anyway, that's my staff thought.
And the conversation was more to address not tying their hands on a city staff recommendation when it does not fall into the, what we talked about. And was the last meeting of including the list, second time here. I think most of the public thought that was residential, that we're trying to rezone into commercial.
Sure.
So I think if we would have said that,
There's some
that lady said,
message.
I don't want anything behind me.
Yeah.
I agree, I don't blame her. But if you would have said, would you rather have any storage? This is currently zoned for a nightclub or auto repair store that has air tools. She most likely picked any storage behind her than what it was currently zoned for.
There was a lot of feedback of, well, we don't want anything to go on there.
That's not acceptable.
Right, I mean, sooner or later, something's gonna go in.
Right. And on many storage compared to what it's already zoned to accept. I think most people are thinking that storage is quiet, zero, that sort of thing. So, just if you took example, the 5 acres by the water tower. That is zoned one. Is essentially church and school and city maintenance road, that's the water tower. On 3 sides of it. That would be something that with our conversation would address that piece.
It is also future newer future land.
That's your perspective, the 2 pieces from the last meeting.
Yeah, again, that's I think what we've ran into the most in trying to identify spots that would work with the current zoning is the spots that are available. You apparently have decided they are
My point,
new urbanism.
Sure.
my point to this, and I really like that new urbanism. In that meeting I talked to you, that west piece, if you're gonna really go with new urbanism, you need 60 acres. Get 40, 60 acres to really put a plan together. I don't think a 5 acre parcel is gonna ruin what Norwalk could potentially be with that project. I personally don't. You've got a piece of ground that's sat for 20+ years. How long are we gonna wait? I guess what we're looking for is, does Norwalk really say this should not be close to residential? Could it be where it has plenty of buffers and it's very limited in where it's touching? If a project, the last one we had was touching residential on 3 different sites. I totally agree if that's where Norwalk wants to be, but if one is only, let's say, touching 100 to 200 feet of backing up to one side, is that suitable? And that's where I think of P and Z needs to be a little flexibility or allow a little bit of flexibility to the city planner to say, yes, this probably works.
Well, I think you need deeper and you need to classify that residential, because I think I have a different opinion if that's R4 versus R2 versus R1. Right or wrong.
In what sense? Single family,
We-
bad. R4,
Standard. you know,
I think
your
it
higher
is-
density,
It is up
housing,
at-
you would
And it
expect
backs up to a height.
something more like that.
In the project that we were looking to, we weren't gonna tell everyone what we're doing
Yeah.
right away, but it is R4, I believe, right? Or it's higher density, this spot, yeah.
That's-
That's adjacent. to R4. So what it does bump up to would be like an R4.
I think I would have I guess myself, I would have an easier time putting a storage, self-storage facility next to an R4 than I would. Maybe even an R2 rather than an R1.
On the flip side, residential density is gonna help new urbanism succeed quicker.
Get that.
I'd agree with you though, AJ. I mean, I think when you think of, facilities that you guys are trying to build, it's more common to see them against something like an R4 as opposed to a single family development.
And that's what led us to finding a new place.
Like I said, we don't have a lot of C3 in our current zoning plan. There's not a lot of options, right? Even less of industrial space that's really adjacent to anything that gives you any sort of traffic. So I understand the plight and the problem.
What kind of action would be appropriate for the commission? For this site?
What do we need to do code wise? Do we need to
Right.
direct staff to potentially look at modifying our C3 or our language around self-storage facilities? What's the proper?
I think part of that depends on how you would want staff to address that, or how you think something going forward might look like. One way to look at that would be, should we consider doing something from a C3 perspective and changing what uses are allowed? Another thing could just be expressing a willingness to look at zoning something C3 if it's in a new urbanism land use category, right? And there doesn't need to be a motion necessarily for that. And again, just from all of that, remembering that, you're advisory to the council, as, Jim had pointed out in our previous presentation. So, that's just your thoughts again on that. And then similarly, even changing the C3 stuff, I mean, it wouldn't necessarily be a direction to staff. I guess it'd be a recommendation to council that we should consider making that change. And then I guess council would ultimately make the decision if they wanted to move forward with an ordinance change. And then we'd come back through and do the whole public hearing process. So.
Is it as simple as the line, because the current line is, it is intended that this district be located along major streets and not close to residential areas. Well, we're like 99% residential in Norwalk, right? So areas that were not adjacent, at least along main streets, there's pretty much one or two spots that really meet that criteria.
Yeah.
So is it just changing that language of not close to residential areas to tighten up what that definition is? Or the language around that to make it a little bit looser?
I think that could help. And then I think from a zoning change that would be needed, that probably is the first way to take a crack at it. And then the second one, I think, is really, again, it gets back to the areas that they've been looking at and the areas that we have in town where this could go. Lots of them tend to be new urbanism, right? So there's two ways to look at it. One would be a project request to change the land use plan, and we go through and we do the public hearings for that and decide if we want to make that change. The other one would be to review the new urbanism language, and does a mini warehouse as a commercial use fit with a definition of new urbanism from our future land use plan? I think you could probably find a way to make that determination. Land use plans are usually written vague enough that you can kind of make things work the way you want.
I guess I'll throw my.
Our esteemed attorneys here.
Yeah,
he'll
I
give
know,
us-
and I was whispering that I have trouble sitting and not getting talking, so the flexibility really is, I mean, by law, the flexibility really is there for Elliott to kind of make those decisions, okay? It's set up so that there is a review board and there's a city council and there's the laws, and you got to follow those procedures. So I think Luke's hit it on the head that really you're almost looking more of a legislative type ordinance changing something. And I guess what I would look and see or recommend is it's kind of hard to, there's a lot of different ways to, you know, skin this cat as far as figuring out a way to be more accommodating for storage. So I think that's what we're really talking about, is not going to be more accommodating for storage. And I think if the board were inclined to say, you know what, I think we are just really too strict on storage. And we should consider having them elsewhere. I mean, you could ask staff to kind of review it and come back with some sort of report or some sort of different suggestions on what to do, whether it is to amend the usages within C3, whether it's to have this usage go into a different zoning area, or whether it's to have it be a, you know, a conditional use where you have a little bit more review before you approve it. To take a look at it. So there's a lot of different ways to look at it. And I think the way to start it would be to, if the board were wanting that, would be to direct staff just to come back with solutions and maybe a, you know, more of a game plan on how you can logically address it. Because, you know, I appreciate that, you know, there's kind of a general request. And that was my first question, like, well, I'm not quite sure what they're asking here. And
We weren't
you really
either.
know what you're asking, but I think what you're asking was a discussion. Yes. Discussion. And I think first of all, LA doesn't have the authority to say, but we're going to ignore the code. You know, I think we should go away from C3. But certainly, if the P&Z does have the ability to recommend the council that they reconsider their ordinances, and if there is some sort of exceptions, and I'm not saying there is, but if there is, certainly can be looked at and suggested. So I think what it could start out with is if our planning zoning board is not happy with the way the current ordinances are, I think that's the first step. And then, you know, that would give Elliot and all staff time to sit down, really analyze and to get a good answer versus shoot from the hip while we're at it. You know, an open meeting when we were outside.
We'd be happy to do that.
So my thought is, my personal view, I guess, would be that I am more inclined to look at where more C3 would be appropriate, including whether or not it falls into the new urbanism land use definition, rather than looking at whether a mini warehouse is more appropriate in C2. I guess is my thought.
I'm more inclined to do that. I do not favor changing the ordinance language at this moment.
Okay, so we can bring back to you kind of a review of our land use plan and its language and the stuff, and we can take a more detailed look at all that.
So question, so looking at the C3 uses from a nuisance standpoint, right? Because the self-storage utility is, it's really a non-nuisance type of thing, right? There's not people coming and going constantly. If we start to rezone land in C3, there's a lot of, I call them relatively nuisance types of things that can show up in a C3. Is there a need to separate a non-nuisance type of use for property versus a nuisance type of use for property?
So I think the way to do that is to itemize those non-nuisance land uses and maybe throw them into the special use permit section of C2.
That'd be one way to look at it.
That might be the best way to do it. The other thing is like looking at new urbanism specifically.
Yeah.
You can put any use really in new urbanism if you design it properly, right? So that's the other dimension of this that we haven't really talked about. And in the Des Moines Metro, most of the mini storages and the ones that you guys had as your examples, they all kind of are that single level, you know, design that are one story and whatnot. But then you look up Highway 28 at what U-Haul's building, that when done architecturally well, I think fits pretty good in at least my vision of what a new urbanism category is like.
Yeah, but then I would be less likely to do something like that adjacent to even an R4. or something,
Potentially,
you know what I mean?
yes, and also the capital, I'm not blinded to how much of a
Right.
bigger investment that is. I mean,
Yep.
I understand how deep coffers go, and these days that's not very, but it is possible and worth considering.
That's the trick, right? Having enough traffic.
Yes.
The California next over, that's all. Doesn't cost this much money. Has to be on a fairly decent thoroughfare.
Yep.
To make it work.
Yep.
That's the.
I get it. Does
So,
staff have enough?
I feel like we've got, I mean, yeah, at the very least, you know, there's clearly a desire to continue looking at this. So we can go back and spend some of our staff time doing a little bit more work on it, knowing that that's something you all want to see. And bring back some thoughts on the land use as well as just the zoning itself. And I think Elliot makes a good point about, you know, and you as well, AJ, the, you know, nuisance uses of a C3 or maybe the more intense uses versus something that maybe is less intense. And how can we maybe work that out? So
We would prefer to have a can-do attitude about commercial development than a can't-do attitude about commercial.
let's try to find a way to make something happen.
Groundbreaking stuff.
Good.
Thank you for
guys.
your time.
Thank you
Yeah,
guys very
thank
much.
you.
Appreciate it.
Okay. Item number 8 is a request from Fairway Inc. for approval of the site plan for Fairway. Elliot, would you brief us on this item?
Yes, so this is the site plan for Fairway. It is going to be at the northeast corner of Chatham and Highway 28. The building itself is sited pretty much in the northeast corner of that as well. We've done an immense amount of back and forth with the development team on this. We've given them a pretty hard time, so we appreciate their patience big time. But this is a general layout. Hughes Drive is going to be one of the main access points. That's the one that runs east of the building containing subway right now. This is just a little bit further up the road. It's actually built up until about the southernmost line on the Fairway site. It's got accompanying trail extending along Highway 28, full pedestrian facilities, and we're doing this a little bit, not exactly out of order per se, but you guys are also going to receive a preliminary plat with this that creates official lot of record designations and then also defines the right of way for that Hughes Drive piece. We've had to do a little bit of finagling to make that work with the building. There's also the PUD, the HH Norwalk PUD that is still going through city council. So approval of the building siting with that close setback is going to be contingent on that rezoning being approved.
Just to hit on that real quick, status of things that did obviously come to you all. You recommended approval with a couple changes to council. Council approved the first reading with directing staff to go back and look at some ideas on how the properties east of Hughes Drive on the north side of Chatham in the HH Norwalk area could be more similar, or if it should be more similar to the town center street frontage look of the south side of the street. So we're currently working through that. We didn't have any comments, and I don't expect there to be anything that would change the PUD that would change what this site plan currently is. So the kind of, and maybe Elliot was going to get to this next, but the process going forward is we're getting this through you guys, and then wouldn't be approved to council until they got all of their readings of the PUD done. But this just gets kind of one thing out of the way. So I think we're on a good track with all of that, and I don't expect, fingers crossed, there to be anything that would have this come back to you. But if for some case the PUD changed and there was changed rules, we would have to run this back through you all as well.
Can you scroll up the site plan? Is that a connection to Highway 28 or is it just?
Chatham and Hughes Drive.
Okay.
This section there's for trucks to pull in and then back up.
Back from like. Okay.
Yep.
So there's nothing directly off of Highway 20.
Correct. Yeah.
There's no right in, right out kind of deal. Okay.
Are there any members of the public in person or on Zoom who would like to speak on this item? Any other questions by the commission?
On the north side, I mean, is it just landscaping that's gonna block whatever, the disposals and things along those lines that you would see coming, if you're traveling southbound? It looks like that's where they have the truck drop off.
Yeah,
and-
so yeah, they've got some landscaping up there. Yeah, the open space calculation on here is a little bit. It's just a little bit spread out compared to how it usually is. But
And there
there's
is-
no buffer requirement on here, and they're preserving that tree line on the west side of the trail as well.
And the enclosure area has what they're proposing to get a 10-foot fence variance
Yep.
for that kind of boxed in area
So,
on the
yeah,
north.
the area just north of that spot where it juts out, that's gonna contain some of the refrigeration units and, we've got an application in for the Board of Adjustment to grant them a 10-foot fence, which 6 is the typical limit, but I think that meets the reasonableness test for screening of mechanical machinery at our new grocery store, so.
Is this going to have and I'm trying to look at it, a walkability to it? Is it going to have a sidewalk or trail that leads?
Yeah, so it's got a crossing, it got a trail on the west side of the property, full sidewalk on the south side. The road for Hughes Drive will have sidewalk on one side. And Luke, we've got our 4 uses on the east side of this. So it's gonna have pretty good proximity to a decent amount of housing.
Yeah, R4, well, so within the HHPUD, we had R4 and C3 as options on the east side of Hughes. So, and we'd heard very, very preliminarily that there were some potential high density residential developers interested in some of that area.
You'll potentially have to stop at Chatham.
Yeah, yep.
With crosswalks.
Yep. We have a Fairway representative on Zoom that was trying to talk, so they couldn't do their hand raised, but so I don't know if they're Kobe, if you're on and you wanted to make some comments, feel free.
Yep, sorry about that. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, we got you.
Thank you. And Kobe Pritchard, I'm Fairways Director of Real Estate. Just wanted to send a quick thank you to the city. I know we put a lot of work and effort into this. Myself, obviously, I'm available for questions. We also have Matt Heath, who's our in-house retail engineer, and then Adam Scheffner, who's our civil engineer. So we're all here available if needed, but appreciate the time, and we look forward to getting started this spring and reinvesting in Norwalk. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Any questions for the representatives from Fairway? Hearing nothing, I'll entertain a motion to approve the request from Fairway Inc. for their site plan.
Thompson motions.
4 seconds.
Hillary, would you call the roll, please?
Samuelson,
Aye.
Forrest,
Aye.
Thompson,
Aye.
Reginator.
Aye. Thank you, everyone. Item number 9 is a request from Hubble Realty Company for approval of Holland Point preliminary plat 3. Elliot, would you brief us on this item, please?
Yep, apologies for the ellipse in the map. I couldn't get the parcel data to update in my system, so that looks a little funny. But this is the numbering is a little bit weird on here. So this is the 3rd preliminary plat. We've already had 2 finals, and then the 3rd final plat is going to be somewhere other than this, just because the preliminary ones are getting broken out into phases. So that's a naming convention thing. But this is gonna go south of the 1st preliminary plat and contain a combination of R1 and a few R2 lots. There's a continuation of R2 on the south side of Sayre Drive from what was also R2 in a previous phase. You've got a significant amount of trail in this plat extending eastward from an existing stub in a previous phase. There's also going to be a trail running south from that T down to Colonial Parkway, which is also going to have trail on it, as well as Sayre Drive on the west side. So really hitting that trail piece pretty hard with this. The only thing that's a little bit outstanding, and I had a call with actually two things, call with Jeremy, our fire inspector earlier today. Our first roundabout in the city, and this was contemplated in the original PUD back in 2018. We just had some questions for the project engineers about the curb structure, the lane width, and making sure that that's all kosher with fire department. So Jeremy's working on that with them. And then the only other item was related to the parkland. And I mentioned in the staff report what was going on with this. Because the subdivision regulations have a pretty strict requirement for big contiguous pieces of flat parkland. The proposal that's going before you guys tonight is going to also have to get recommendation from the Parks and Rec Commission. Because they don't hold their meetings as often, that meeting is going to be April 5th. We thought that it would be okay for them to get your guys' recommendation last time you got their recommendation. So that's just kind of an explanation of the timing of all of it. The PUDs are required to dedicate 6.7 acres of parkland, and if you include the trail easement area, the total comes out to a little bit over 11 between these three pieces. So that's about all I have on this. I know we have a couple of project engineers at the meeting tonight, one virtual, one in person. Otherwise I can take questions or move on.
Would any members of the public in person or on Zoom like to speak on this agenda item?
So I'm here, Dean Rogier, CDA. The layout is basically following the PUD that was approved. All the streets are in the same locations, and it's pretty much complying with everything that was planned out before. And yeah, there is quite a bit more park than was required, and part of that's due to some steeper slopes. So they want to make sure they had enough room to do something meaningful in there. And there's a lot of trails that Hubble is constructing also on top of that. So a lot more park than would normally be provided for a site. And this was all done with a PUD way back when, before all the new subdivision regs came through. So that plays a factor into it all also. But basically just want to let you know I'm here if there's any questions.
You guys are moving.
Yeah. Yeah. Things are going pretty good, I think.
You utilize the roundabout in any other areas in Des Moines where we could go and see kind of what that looks like?
Yeah, I mean, this roundabout's a little different than a main one that you would see on, you know, there's a lot of them in Johnston, Ankeny, where they're on busier roads, more of an arterial road. So this is actually a little smaller scale road, minor collector type road. Yeah, I mean, we can, off the top of my head, I can't think of one that's this size, because these are a little bit smaller than the bigger ones. So it's only a single lane of traffic moving around there. I mean, part of the reason for this was to calm traffic so that you don't have all the trucks blasting through, and it's basically just to slow people down and act as an amenity to the area. So yeah, there's quite a few of examples out there, and they seem to work pretty well.
I'll collect some of those and put them in the staff report to the council if you recommend approval. I didn't think to do that.
Okay.
There's a couple in Clive that are like that. Just didn't like this randomly in.
Yeah, that cut through from 35th Street. Kind of that
Behind the water tower, yeah. I think that's about the size.
And one of the things Dean pointed out there as to why I think even before the PUD came through, in some of our old transportation plan, we showed a roundabout there was really to discourage industrial traffic from deciding to go east on Colonial. So it's like, well, we can put a structure there, we can do that unique intersection treatment, move traffic, and then also hopefully a guy in a 18-wheeler's like, I don't want to mess with that. So.
Yep.
Any other comments or questions from the commission? Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
Hearing nothing, I'll entertain a motion to approve Bubble Realty Company's Holland Point preliminary plat 3.
Forced motions.
Thompson seconds.
Hillary, would you call the roll, please?
Forrest,
Yes.
Thompson.
Aye.
Samuelson.
Aye.
Reagan.
Aye. Thank you, everyone. Item number 10 is a city council update from David Lester. Was David on the Zoom tonight?
He logged in.
I don't have anything for you guys tonight. Good discussion again.
Thanks, David. Item number 11 is an economic development update from Holly. Holly, I thought I saw you on the Zoom there.
Yes, I'm here, Megan. Thank you. And I'm going to give a really long update specifically because Luke Nelson just texted me and told me not to. Okay.
Good job, Luke.
I'll keep it brief for the sake of time. And I will just leave it open that if anybody has any questions about projects or you're hearing things or rumors or you see developments happening, absolutely feel free at any time to reach out. I'll tell you everything I know. Carson reached out a while back and gave him all the updates. So we can always go that route as well. But just on a couple of the bigger projects where we're at with Norwalk Central for timing, everything is moving along pretty well. I mean, there's been a whole lot of hoops to jump through and things to do with utilities and gas easements, all sorts of fun things like that, but everything is moving forward. There's maybe just a little bit of a delay in the city's recreation facility arriving. I think they had it scheduled for early June, and it looks like it might arrive closer to July. And that's really just more based on the design and engineering. But they said that they will be able to make up some of the timing there in construction, and we should still stay on target with that. And then the roads, the rest of the infrastructure is still on time. That should be completed by fall. The sports turf fields, as you guys can see, construction is back up and running now that the weather's getting a little bit nicer. So they're moving pretty quickly now. So their fields and their south concession facility should both be up and running by June. I know they're planning to have some tournaments by end of May. So they're doing really well there. In terms of the commercial aspects inside of Norwalk Central and north of Norwalk Central. So kind of in the that northern section where Fairway's going, there's a lot of activity in there as well. We have both of our hotels are still moving forward, doing pretty well. Looking at a couple of development agreements coming forward to council in the next month or two for both of them. Starbucks is still on track as far as we're aware, and it looks like Scooters is doing really good business. So thank you all for supporting them. And then on the certified site, the large area just south of Delaware where you've seen some construction, also south of Michael Foods, that is moving along pretty well. Also, we should know by June if we are going to be awarded that certification, but everything's being turned in as requested. Some studies and surveys, soil work and environmentals and geotech reports will be getting underway here pretty soon on that land. But the 40 acres that was recently purchased by Norwalk JV22, as you see on the screen there, the developers, they're moving along, doing some really great work that they should have some facilities up here within the next several months. And then they will have some build to suit space as well as land available down there. So if you know any businesses or companies looking for facility or land to develop for light industrial, manufacturing, warehouse, distribution, anything like that, let me know and I'll connect you to those brokers. And then also, we do have development sites available kind of sprinkled throughout Norwalk, mostly along Highway 28, but up in North Shore and then over on 50th and Beardsley. We have several other areas that are kind of maybe a little bit unknown just because you don't see bulldozers moving on them right now, but we do have land available in those areas. So please reach out at any time if you have interest or hear of a need. But I'll leave it at that for Luke's sake. But let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you, Holly. Item number 12 is a community development update from Luke Paris. What do you have for us?
Yeah, just a couple things. We run our low and moderate income rehab program. We ran that for the first time last year. We just transitioned that over to the Mid Iowa Planning Alliance to help us do the kind of legwork on reviewing and approving applications and things. We'll still approve it through the city. But that has let us get a grant for an additional $45,000. So we have $95,000 earmarked in total to help with that project. So that should get us 7 or 8 properties that hopefully we can help out. So that'll be good. Site plan wise, we had just today submitted a retail center that would be, and Elliot, do you recall how many bays that was?
I hadn't scrutinized.
I hadn't looked at that close.
6-ish.
Came in this morning, so basically kitty corner from Fairway in the Norwalk Central area. So that'd be the first Norwalk Central building, right up against Chatham, on the southeast corner of Hughes and Chatham, and then also a hotel site plan for that same corner. So pretty quick there. You know, we've got the Starbucks site plan down there on Gordon. We've got those 2 new site plans in. We've got Fairway. So pretty quick there, that area is starting to fill in, which is good. You know, the goal there was to spur commercial on that side of the highway and to get some commercial depth off of the highway. And I think that's the fact that a hotel wants to go 1 street deep off of there, I think is a good sign. So what else did we do recently? We did a presentation at the school on Friday. Last year we did a talk to the AP Human Geography class, and so they invited us back. And I missed the second one. I had to leave in the afternoon, but we had some good discussions, so that was fun.
Sorry, go ahead.
A site plans on the C3 were rezoned along the highway adjacent to.
Not yet.
Any idea what's gonna happen to Warrior Run Golf Course?
No.
Elliot, any additional update for us?
Nothing really more to add other than. And I don't know if we have any residential plats in right now. That barrel might be dry for a bit, so we're really gonna be hoping.
The Hackney Hills folks did kind of kick back a discussion about, we had been working through them with the cost of turn lane agreement for them. And so we refined that for them in February. Our engineer got us some additional dollars. So I'm expecting something to happen with that one here in the spring. So that'd be Hackney Hills.
What about any other updates on the old fairway, I guess current fairway?
I've not heard of anything. I don't know if Holly's still on, if she has, but you heard anything?
I'm on, and I don't know if Kobe is still on, but I mean, we have a lot of interest. It's just going to be up to what and when Fairway decides to accept, I guess.
Probably not.
Will there be
anything with the fences along 28?
This is 128.
Yeah, there was something a few years back about the fencing.
No, we're
Oh, yeah.
screening potentially corridor. We don't right away to do anything, do we?
It's tight.
That's what I thought. You guys looked at it. I know.
The fences on Highway 28.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, that is a project that we definitely want to have done, and we thought maybe we could afford to do it sooner than we are able to now, but there were just so many other projects that came up that took priority over that one, but it is still a priority, and we hope in the next couple of years as we improve that corridor from Highway 5, the entrance from Highway 5, moving south along 28, that we'll just do it in kind of one big shot and do landscaping and get the monument sign up at the highway intersection there, and then do those fences at the same time. So whenever Luke Nelson decides to give us the money for it, we'll do it.
Just throwing you under the bus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I shouldn't have said it.
So gets her come to P and Z. All right, our next meeting is April 10th, 2023 at 5:45 PM. I will not be in attendance, so if you could let Donna know that, that would be helpful.
Yep.
And at this point, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned at 7:04 PM. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. That was way earlier than that.
You did about commercial property. All
Because Jim didn't
well-
talk as much.
Now, just at the market today.
Yeah,